on your computer. Okay, let's see if I can, whoops, get to the right. There we go. Okay. It should let people in automatically, but we'll find out if I have to keep holding him in. Okay, so can y'all see that? Okay, good. Um, I'm assuming that most of you are here because you've been in this place before. Um, I'd actually love to know where you're coming from today. Kristen, you're here in Utah, right? Asia, are you in California? I don't know if she
I
can.
am. I am.
How is it there? Because
Um,
rain.
yeah, I mean, oh, let's see. Oh, you can hear me. Okay. Yeah, no, it's fine. Um as I mentioned to you, I have other commitments so that I'm gonna have to leave soon, but I wanted to get as much as I can before I leave.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll make sure you get the recording as well. And Laura, you said you're in Las Vegas. My baby's, I call her my baby sister. She's like a grown woman with children of her own, but is in Vegas as well. We were there over the holidays, so it's a great place to be this time of year. Okay, so um, many of you have been in this spot, or you have people that you care for that have been in this spot every single year. You get really frustrated with. Sorry, I'm going to go back to the last one. So most people, they start out the beginning of the year cutting calories, committing to running or walking or spinning or doing HIIT workouts, drinking lots of water, and then they find themselves in the same place again a year later. Um, my goal today is not to like do anything really fancy. I really want to be able to serve. So if there's anything that I go over that you have a question about, I hope that you'll stop me um, and ask questions because that's what I'm here is to just help give you some support. Um, so if you are frustrated, you're here again. I hear you. I hear this from women on a daily basis, especially once they start to move into their 30s and 40s. A lot of things change, and they complain of being exhausted, run down, a little angry. They feel a little crazy. Sometimes their depression will kick in, and they feel like they're doing the same things that used to work over and over again, and hoping that somehow it's going to change this time. And we all know that um, as much as we want that to work, when it's not working, it's not working, and we have to do something different. Um, so I just want people to know that you are not crazy. The game has totally changed. As we age, as we head into more stressful life situations, as we head into perimenopause and menopausal years, our body needs something very different than it did when we were in our teens and our 20s, um, in our childbearing years. And most of us have not been given any understanding as to what that is. And it makes sense that it's all about hormones. So it's it's something that intuitively I think most women understand that it's all about hormones, but we also don't want it to be, or we don't understand what those hormones are that we need to be paying attention to because you think, oh, when most women hear hormones, like what do you hear? What's the hormones you think about when you hear someone say it's all about hormones? You can unmute yourself or pop it in the chat. I don't even know if I can see the chat anymore. All right, you may have to unmute yourself until I find the chat. But most people feel like oh, I'm just talking about estrogen. I'm just talking about progesterone. And while those hormones are really important, there's actually other hormones um, that we need to be aware of. So first of all, I think it's really important to define what a hormone is. If you haven't had the opportunity to take a physiology or organic chemistry or hormone class recently, then you may not remember that a hormone is a messenger. And we have messengers that these hormones affect almost every single organ, every single function in our bodies, and are really crucial to our weight, to whether we gain weight or we lose weight, or hold on to weight. And we have hormones functioning everywhere, all the time, and don't even know it. Whoops, there we go again. Insulin is the hormone that is most important to pay attention to if you want to lose weight. A lot of people think insulin is only for people who are dealing with diabetes, and that is not the case. We have a lot of new information, a lot of new research. For a long time, we focused on glucose for good reason, because when we saw glucose levels rise, then we saw all sorts of problems happening. We see increasing number of people developing diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and PCOS, and all sorts of other things. But we now know that the number that we should be paying attention to is insulin. And that when the insulin has generally been out of whack for a long time before we see glucose numbers start to become problematic. But we haven't been paying attention to insulin. We've been paying attention to glucose because, as we are starting to discover more layers and more layers about our bodies, that was the easy one to track. And now we know that insulin is the one that is really causing a lot of damage in bodies. Not that insulin is a bad hormone, but when insulin is constantly staying elevated, in order to try and keep glucose under control, it creates a lot of inflammation in the body because insulin is a building hormone. Insulin is designed to build and store. And so if insulin is raised in your body, sorry, hopefully you can see that. But when insulin is up, you cannot burn fat. You just can't. Your body's not designed to burn fat when you have raised insulin levels. You have to have insulin levels lower in order for your body to unlock glucagon, which is what the hormone that helps you to lose weight, or helps you to burn fat, is what we want to say. So, oops, we've got a few more people trying to come in. And so, if you want to lose weight, if you want to be able to have a healthy weight, you have to be able to learn to control your insulin. So, hey, Julie, welcome. I apologize, I didn't see you in the waiting room. Hopefully you weren't there very long. And I will go over any of this that you missed in just a minute. So cortisol is another hormone that is really, really important for weight loss. Cortisol gets a bad rap. Cortisol is not a bad hormone, but it is a hormone that we need to be aware of. We need cortisol levels to go in a pattern, in kind of it needs to come up in the morning and then gently fall throughout the day until it gets to a low level at night. And when we see that happen, we can sleep well. Our bodies can transition from insulin burning to fat burning. But most of us live in either a chronic state of high cortisol levels or in a chronic state of low cortisol levels because we've stressed ourselves out. So cortisol regulates blood sugar. It actually is a glucocortisol, which means it turns on glucose. It gives our body a rush of glucose, especially when we first wake up in the morning or when we have a stressful situation, so that we can deal with the things that we need to be doing. And so we want cortisol to be in a healthy range. We don't want to totally flatline our cortisol, but we also want to make sure that it's not raised all the time. Cortisol also regulates fat burning because your body, when it needs to be able to move quickly, when it needs to be able to access energy quickly, cortisol levels are going to rise so that you can dump glucose into your system, burn that glucose, and be able to get out there and grab that kid who's about to get hit by a car, or get out of the house quickly if you're late for an appointment, or this is your fight, flight, freeze, even your hormone that's going to kick in when you start to do things like cleaning the house because you've got company coming over. And so it's not going to really tap into the fat burning. If it needs something fast, it's going to tap into glucose burning, which is good. But if we are taking in too much glucose or we can't access our body fat, then we're missing out on a really important source of energy for our body. So cortisol also increases insulin levels, which tells our body to store fat. It tells us to turn glucose or the food we're eating into body fat, and we don't want that. We want to be able to utilize it healthily. We want to be able to store body fat when we need it and then access it later so that we're not carrying around an excess of it. Cortisol also will slow your metabolism. So if you're not getting enough to eat, if you're constantly chronically lowering your caloric intake, cortisol is going to slow your metabolism down to match that. which is really frustrating, right? When you've got somebody who, when you are trying really hard to just cut your calories and eat very little, and you expect for your body to do what it did when you were 15 or 20 and lose weight really quickly because you skipped a few meals. Um, and it just doesn't work that way, because the longer that we spend in a chronic caloric deficit, the slower our metabolism gets to match it, because it wants us to survive. It's just a survival mechanism. Um, so it's very much worth understanding. And it's one of the hormones that I help women better understand what's going on in their body, because there's lots of different ways that we can regulate cortisol. We can regulate it through our diet, we can regulate it through mindfulness, we regulate it through lots of different ways, and I teach you. So I teach that a lot. Another hormone is leptin. How many of you have heard of leptin? Are you familiar with that? Oh, good. Kristen says yes. Um, Leptin is the hormone that signals your body when you're full. But a lot of people become leptin resistant. I don't know. I'm sure you know people who are always hungry, like they eat and they're hungry again right after they ate. Like my kid, my boys are famous for that. You know, they go in, we have a great meal, and then 20 minutes later, they're in the pantry searching for something to crunch on because they just ate. And oftentimes that's a sign that your body is leptin resistant. It's not being sensitive to those signals saying you're full, you're full, you're full. And that happens often when we're not getting the right nutrition. So our body is telling us, hey, I didn't get enough B vitamins, I didn't get enough healthy fats, I didn't get enough protein. And so it's going to continue to signal to your body, I'm hungry, even if you have eaten enough calories to that you should be full. But also, as we put excess weight on, excess fat on, that fat, those fat cells become increasingly more leptin resistant. And yes, you're going to feel hungry more often. Um, so what we need to do is help you become more sensitive to leptin. And we do that through things like a hormone balancing diet, like we talked about at the beginning, where we'll lower insulin levels, but also by making sure that we're managing ghrelin. So some women come to this place in life and they're like, the problem is I'm not hungry. I don't eat very much because I'm not hungry. And so ghrelin is your hunger hormone. So some women have a problem. Some women struggle with turning leptin off. And there are ways that we can do that so that you do feel full, because you don't want to walk around feeling hungry or hangry all the time. But others, they don't feel hungry. And so they have a really hard time eating the things that they need to be eating or eating enough. And so cortisol levels come in, they spike, they lower your metabolism even lower. And then you get into this dangerous spiral of not eating, losing muscle, holding on to fat because your body thinks you're in this constant state of stress, or that you're in a state of low access to food. And so we need to also know how to turn on ghrelin, because that'll signal hunger, that'll help improve our digestive system, gives our liver and our gallbladder a kickstart that it needs to get you going, and then allows you to better metabolize the foods that are coming in. So we need to be sensitive to both leptin and to ghrelin in order for leptin to turn off ghrelin so that we're not constantly hungry, and for ghrelin to turn on when it's time for us to eat. So sorry, we already checked. I already kind of covered that. A lot of women, or a lot of men too, talk about being hangry. Has anybody ever, or any of you struggle with hangriness? You're all so quiet today. Hangriness is, nobody's got time for that. It is a miserable thing to be. And often when we're responding to hormones and not to true hunger is when we feel hangry. And so recognizing the difference between cravings and hunger is really important. And so that's again leptin, it's again ghrelin, but it's also, let's see if this is in here, it's also about gut health, because our microbiome is going to be telling there, we have a whole system of signaling that goes on in our gut. And if we have an unhealthy microbiome, if we have an unhealthy gut, if our bowels are not moving appropriately, if they're sluggish, or if we're having lots of loose stools and there's lots of overgrowth, maybe you've been sick and you've had to be on a lot of antibiotics, or you've been under tremendous stress, or you just have eaten a ton of sugar and things that have really mismatched your healthy gut bacteria, then you're that unhealthy gut bacteria is going to be constantly signaling to your brain, I need more. I need more sugar. I need more fried foods. I need more crunchy things. And your body is going to be constantly besieged by cravings. And so taking the time to understand your gut health is another piece of the puzzle that's going to help you better manage your cravings, better manage your hunger, and better balance your hormones. So there are dozens of other hormones that are involved in healthy weight. We've talked about cortisol, and we haven't really touched on dopamine or testosterone. One of the things that's worth noting is that testosterone, when we see low testosterone, which we see a lot in women and men, that's almost always a sign that we have an insulin resistance problem, because high insulin is going to lower the amount of testosterone that your body can build, can grow, can create. The exception is going to be in women with PCOS, where we see an imbalance of testosterone and a high level of insulin as well. And the answer again with that is you almost always to lower insulin and improve metabolic health. Estrogen, progesterone, melatonin, growth hormone, these are all hormones that have a lot to do with how we hold on to our weight, how we build muscle, how our body and our brain responds to the foods that we're eating. And so there are lots and lots of pieces of the puzzle that we are just learning about, that have just come to, they've just become very present in our modern research. And we have a lot more research around women's health now than we did even 20 years ago. So I work with a lot of women who grew up, and myself included, in a time when we were supposed to eat really, really low fat. We were told just eat really low fat and that will help you lose weight. And we now know that that was really poor advice, that we have seen a huge increase in chronic disease, even though the majority of the population has followed this advice. Snack wells, yes. We lived on snack wells in the 80s and 90s, and early 2000s. And so what we saw is a lot of people who were eating low fat. We saw this huge walk away from muscle building and doing lots and lots of cardio. And we now know that that is really poor. It's a really poor strategy to stay healthy, especially as a woman, that we need to be building our muscles constantly. Because once we hit our 30s, we start losing about 10% of our muscle mass a year. And the less active we become as we age, the more rapidly we deplete our muscles. And without muscles, you can't burn glucose. And we lose ability to stay strong in our hips and in those important big muscle groups that are going to keep us safe and keep us strong as we head into our later years, and keep us from having hip fractures and back problems as well. So we need to have adequate protein. We need to have adequate fat in order to grow our muscles. If you're not eating enough protein, you're not going to be able to grow muscle, no matter how much weight you're lifting or how much you're doing to help grow your muscles. So I have done all the talking today, and I'm just gonna stop this share for a minute and come back to y'all that are here and see if I can answer any questions. I tend to just overload people with information, and I promised myself I wouldn't do that today. So has this made any sense to you? Are there big holes that I've left gaping for you? What can I help you to better understand as you're kind of heading into deciding what to do with your New Year's resolutions?
Well, I love it.
Michelle, oh, go ahead.
I love it. It's been really helpful to understand some of the things, because I have PCOS, but I also have insulin resistance, and now low hormones in everything
Yeah.
as I hit peri-menopause. So like mine's wonky all over the place. So and obviously what I've been doing for my whole life hasn't been working. So something's got
to give. Something's definitely,
yeah. I want to do it more naturally, instead of, well, here you can take this medication for insulin resistance, and then now the hormones aren't working, so let's do, hormone therapy, and then the weight still goes on. So,
right.
so trying to find the balance between all of that, because it sounds like I don't know, is that normal, or is this for like somebody who has all what I have, or because you say like I have low testosterone, but I also have PCOS. All those kinds of things like that. I'm like, oh,
Right.
yeah.
It is super it sounds super complex because of everything
Mhm.
that you're dealing with, and every time you probably go in for another appointment, they find something else. But the honest truth is it can be very simple, and it has to start with your diet. It has to start with your diet. It has to start with managing insulin, and it has to start with managing your cortisol levels. Um,
Mhm.
those are the two hardest things for us as women to manage, because stress, a lot of us have lived long-term lives running on stress. I mean, it's what keeps us going. We think that adrenaline rush is a good thing, because it gets us up and gets us going. But what we now know is that 10 minutes after that adrenaline rush has hit us to get us out the door, to help us save the world or get our kids going or whatever, make it to the meeting on time, we know that our cortisol levels have risen within that 10 minutes, and they tend to stay up until we do something to keep them down. And then once we do that, for long periods of time, then our cortisol levels get all wonky, and we start to see. So cortisol is important because it helps to push out all of the cells that get identified as damaged or potentially cancerous, or all those things in our body. And that's what happens at night. First thing in the morning, we should have a cortisol rise, and that cortisol rise acts as a protection mechanism for us, and it should flush out all of those damaged cells that have been found throughout the night. But when we don't have an adequate cortisol rise in the morning, maybe you wake up and you feel horribly groggy and you just cannot get going until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or until you've had caffeine, or until or maybe you just never feel like you have that rush of energy. We also know that the body's not getting the extra boost that it needs to push those cells out. And so we start to see autoimmune diseases begin to stack up, one autoimmune after another autoimmune after another autoimmune. So what you're describing is unfortunately really, really, I don't want to say normal, but because it's not normal, but it is something that we see quite often. And I'm actually going to show you some stories of some of the clients I've worked with, if you're interested, that have got some of these things as well. But someone else had a question. I apologize. Who had jumped in there?
Oh, it was me. This is Aja.
Hey, Amy.
I've always wondered, how do I know if I'm lacking in hormone, and I need supplements or whatever. Because I'm not really taking anything at the moment. But sometimes I wonder though, because not because, I mean, I don't know. I wonder if I'm
Yeah.
lacking something, and how do I know?
Right. And it's totally normal. Well, it makes sense that you would wonder, because I think one of the really important things to understand is that women's health is such a new study when it comes to modern research. We just women's health really wasn't studied until about the late 1990s, early 2000s, and even then, we still have a lot of things we just don't know. We were treated as little men, like men were studied, men were allowed in all of the research studies and that sort of thing, and then women were just treated like little men. And we now know that that's just not, we're not. We know we've always known we're not little men. And so there probably hasn't been a lot of helpful resources to help you understand that. So one of my favorite tests to know where your hormones are at is the Dutch test. It's a dried urine test, so you would order it. If you are premenopausal, then it's something you would take around day 21 through about 19 through day 23 of your cycle, if you're able to track your cycle. And that tells us about your cortisol levels, your estrogen levels, your progesterone levels, your testosterone levels. It's a dried urine test, and so you would just pee on a little strip and then let it dry, and then you'll send all those into the company, and they'll send you a report. It's wonderful. And then it can also give you some ideas as to things you can do to help support your different pathways to make sure that your hormone levels are regulating, because we don't want to get into a situation where you take estrogen but you don't realize that you don't need estrogen, and then you increase your risks for breast cancer, for estrogen positive breast cancer. So that kind of a test is really helpful. There are some blood tests that your doctor can order. However, they are just snapshot tests. So it's whatever's happening in your blood at the moment. And so you would want to have that done several times over the course of the month, so you can see what your hormones are doing, testosterone, insulin, progesterone, pregnant, all those things doing over the course of the month. So it depends on what you're interested in tracking. understanding where your cortisol is probably one of the most helpful things, because whether you are, even if you're postmenopausal and you don't have that big rush of estrogen and you don't have progesterone at all anymore in your system, cortisol is going to be driving a lot of the other hormones that we've talked about, insulin resistance. And then we also want to be paying attention to dopamine and those types of things. Julie is asking a quick question. Can I send? Sure, I can. I'm happy to send you links to these tests. The Dutch hormone test is when you can get through precision analytical. And then your doctor will have a panel of hormone tests they can do if you have an OB/GYN that you can see, or a primary care doctor that is willing to run those tests for you. So if you are postmenopausal, then you still have estrogen. We have 3 different types of estrogen in our body, but we lose 2 of them. Well, one of them is only predominant when we're pregnant. Okay, Asia, I'll get you the links as well. And then the other type of estrogen goes away when we go through menopause, and then after menopause we just have 1 type of estrogen in our body, and that still needs to be detoxed. It still needs to go through all the pathways and be detoxed so that we don't develop problems like estrogen positive breast cancer, or that also can create a lot of weight gain, especially in our chests and our bellies and our hips and that sort of thing. And so watching that is helpful for all of us. And cortisol levels, again, like I talked about, are a big piece of that puzzle. There was another question somebody asked and I've totally forgotten it already. Kristen, let me show you a couple of, so this is the reason that I run my 12-week program. It's been a really fun program to run. And I will tell you about some of the things that let's see if I can skip to the, so it's a 12-week program that will help you lose weight and balance your hormones. So we work on replenishing the body because that's the most important piece of the puzzle. You're going to hear a lot about detox this time of year. And I hope that you can be keen enough to understand that the best way to detox our body is to nourish it. Our bodies need to be detoxing constantly. That means we need to be pooping, we need to be peeing, but we also need to be having adequate amounts of B12 and B6 and vitamin C and vitamin D, because our cells need to be detoxifying every single day in order for us to be well. And so replenishing our system is the most important thing we can do if we want to make sure that our detox systems are working. And then exercise, movement, and muscle and mindfulness, managing our stress is the second piece to refining those detox pathways and allowing our body to do the thing that it needs to do, because we want to be able to move from glucose burning into fat burning. And we can't do that if we're constantly stressed, and we can't do that if we're constantly eating lots and lots of glucose and keeping our insulin levels high. So, and then we also need to be working on boosting our metabolism, and we can't boost our metabolism if we're constantly reducing our calories. So we've got to find other ways that we can get the food that we need, that will not, the nutrients that we need, and not tell our body to constantly store it as fat. So this is what I did with my last group. This is the 12-week program that I ran for them. I met with each of them individually once. They all asked for a second consultation at the end to kind of give them a next step. And then I gave them access to all of my other master classes. So if they wanted to learn about, if they came in and said, hey, I want to be able to use herbs for this, then they had access to my energy restoration project and my medicine cabinet restoration project. And then I also gave them, I don't know if you can see it because of where these things are, but a number of exercise programs that from beginning all the way up to more challenging, so that you could learn safe ways, some safe main exercises to help start building those big muscle groups. We have 5 main muscle groups that we want to be concentrating on if we want to be able to build a shape as well as build muscle, so that we can better metabolize the glucose that we're taking in. And then also I include a ton of meal plans, lots of accountability, and you'll like this one. So this was my favorite message from one of my clients. One day I got this text from her that said, "Guess who's wearing pants that are out of style because her stylish pants no longer fit." She lost 18 pounds between Halloween and Christmas, and she didn't even go into a full ketogenic diet. We just made a lot of the tweaks that I talked about by helping her lower her insulin resistance and helping her to better balance her diet. She hadn't even started a muscle building program at this point, and she was able to drop 18 pounds, which was phenomenal. Had come from a vegan diet where she just saw herself she put on over 30 pounds trying to follow a vegan diet because it just wasn't the right diet for her. It didn't give her enough protein, it didn't give her enough healthy fats, and her body was really in a lot of distress. So, and then I had another really sweet client. She's teeny, teeny, tiny body frame. So you may look at 142 and go, what, 142? She's really, really tiny. And for her, that was her doctor needed her to get below that. And after about 6 weeks, she sent me a message that said, "I'm so excited." She'd been working on getting below 142 for 4 years. And she finally had lost 4 pounds at the time that I got this message. And she had horrible PMS symptoms, horrible, to the point where she would just shut down for a week. And she was able to get through the last 2 periods that she's been through. She hasn't even, other than being a little bit tired, she hasn't had any PMS symptoms. So balancing those hormones benefits so many places in your body. So Kristen, this is my client Sarah, who we had been working on her thyroid. I don't know how to stop that, sorry. Antibodies for quite some time. And when I put her on this protocol and helped her reduce her insulin levels, got her into a state of ketosis she was only in a state of ketosis for about 8 weeks. Her doc ordered new tests and her thyroid antibodies dropped for the first time in 3 years. Her TSH dropped. Her energy is so much better. She's sleeping through the night. So I got a message from another client last night that she has lost over an inch on her waist and a half inch on her hips. Her PMS is gone as well, and she's finally sleeping through the night. And then I've got another. Say that again.
I just say that I love that she says the sex drive is back because
Yes.
that's
So when she came to me, she's like,
gone.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's like, it's totally flatlined. I could care less. I never want to do it again. And last night she's like, it's back from the dead. And so that's been a huge, huge benefit for her. And then I also have, so Christina didn't ever jump into, so she's still working on incorporating the diet, but she called me yesterday and said, I feel like I finally know what I need to do. She's also struggling with her thyroid as well. And so we've been working on getting her some better recipes and getting her set up to go. And we got her in with a new doc who's going to start some testing for her. And then Alicia, I thought this was a really fun one. Her doc was making her come in every 3 weeks because she was so worried about her blood pressure. It was skyrocketing. And she didn't want to go on the next level of drugs. And so she made a deal with her doc. She said, let me work with Shelly. And her doc said, that's fine. And doc knows me and said, I'll give you 2 months. And when she went in for this last appointment, she was down 10 pounds and her blood pressure is regulated so much. She's like, I don't need to see you for another 4 months. Her doctor was thrilled. And she's thrilled. So we've got her sleeping. We even got her mom in a much better place because she helps take care of her mom as well. So if any of you are interested, I would love to help you write a story just like this for you. It's totally doable. It's something that I have learned to do as well. I've been through lots of training with lots of other docs and programs, and this is something that I've incorporated in my life. And the beautiful thing about it is that it's not just 12 intensive weeks, it's 12 weeks to help you shift to a healthier way of working with your body and looking at your diet and understanding what your body's trying to tell you. And then the benefits just continue to move on. You'll continue to see weight loss, you'll continue to see muscle gain. I was thrilled at Christmas this year that I had the energy to get up and exercise almost every single day in spite of all the crazy and the stress. And I wasn't wiped out like I usually get every year. So so if you're interested, you're invited to come. It's a small group. I only do 10 women at a time. And it's open. It's going to be opening this week. We'll start again next week. And the investment's $2,500 and there's an option to pay monthly. So And we will be meeting. You can choose a time, either Tuesday mornings or Wednesday evenings, whatever works best for you. But I hope that you found the information helpful. I will send you these presentations. I will get you links to the tests that we've talked about, the Dutch test, and some of the other information that we've talked about as well today if you're interested. But I hope that you found this helpful. Do you have any questions for me? You
You
are
did a great
welcome.
job.
Thanks, Kristen. Oh, Asia, thank you for staying so long. Okay,
Thank you.
I'll get you the links.
Yes, thank you.
Or Julie or Laura, can I help answer any other additional questions for either of you?
I just had a quick question. So I just got some tests back and everything was normal. Like I've been losing my hair and I'm guessing it's cortisol because my glucose was high.
Okay.
Like not abnormal, like not like astronomically, but it was higher than like the range it suggested.
So,
So
that's
is that cortisol that's likely high or
well, if your
just
glucose is
like
high, your insulin is high,
uh-huh.
guaranteed. Cortisol has probably got a huge piece of that puzzle. And then the other thing that I would be curious about is your iron levels. When we see hair loss, I always look at iron. I always want to look at iron levels. Did they check ferritin?
I don't recall seeing it on there.
And the other one I would look at is we can kind of suss out your iron levels if we're looking at your CBC, your complete blood count. We can look at your hemoglobin and your hematocrit.
And those looked good.
Okay. And even if they're a little bit like hematocrit, if it's a little bit high, even if it's on the high end of normal, then we are looking at probably a B12 deficiency. And hemoglobin, if it's on the low end of normal, then we want to be looking at your iron as well. But when we see high glucose numbers, absolutely we want to jump in and start to lower that insulin and reduce the inflammation in your body.
And that's just by like eating less sugar, or is that like where you're talking like more like the ketogenic?
I'm a huge fan of ketogenic. Sugar for sure needs to be taken out because you've got so much inflammation that gets created from eating sugar, especially processed sugars. But you're going to want to increase your protein and increase your fat tremendously in order to give your body what it needs to keep going so that you don't put yourself into more of a state of stress. And that's why a ketogenic diet can be so helpful when you see these types of symptoms that you're describing. The thing that's really important to understand about keto is that there's a lot of like misinformation out there in the marketplace that keto is some sort of unnatural process. It's not. Our bodies are absolutely amazing. They're designed to burn glucose when we have glucose, and then they're also designed to burn fat. And that's what ketones do, is they unlock fat stores and burn them. And that's naturally built into our body. It's just that we live in this really amazing day and age where we have access to food all the time. Like most of us have snacks in our cupboards or on our desks or around the corner. And so we're constantly eating and keeping our insulin levels high, but our bodies were designed to adapt, to go from high times of food to low times of food and be able to utilize the fat that we've been storing. We've just gotten away from that. And so our bodies have gotten, would you say lazy? Like we have to give our body a chance to learn to go back into that fat burning. And we do that by eating a really low glucose, low insulin spiking diet and allowing our body to go in and start using ketones again to burn fat.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Laura, can I answer any questions for you?
I don't think I had any questions.
Okay.
That's really good information. Thanks.
Thanks for coming. I love your gorgeous hair.
Oh, thanks.
Well, wonderful. I will get this sent out to all of you so that you've got it for reference and you know how to get me if you've got some additional questions. And I hope to see you again.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.